This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Brian Peña. I always join the Vito podcast, the best podcast in the United States.
And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Geronimo Chirco, alongside my usual sidekick and partner in crime. That is the Doc from Doc and Jock, John Charles Macaroon. John, how's it going?
Vito, always enjoy talking baseball with you. Heard any news regarding the Detroit Tigers lately?
Nothing at all. There's nothing to talk about, is there?
My goodness, Vito. So, we were wrong. We discussed on last week's episode who we thought the likely candidates were, and we were right in terms of discussing a manager with experience. But when the news broke, regarding that the name was going to be Ron Gardenhire, oh my goodness, I was a little bit floored. In that, the Tigers, I thought, were really going to focus on advanced sabermetrics, and to hire a man in his 60s that is going to be learning on the job how to utilize properly advanced sabermetrics. Wow, Vito, I was a little bit floored and surprised, but when you look at it, who is higher up in the Tigers organization? Jim Leyland. And once Gardenhire came from Arizona and did the interview, I'm fairly certain that the combination of a positive review from Jim Leyland, once he interviewed, then they weren't going to let him leave because Gardenhire can bring experience. He's coached in the American League Central. He obviously knows a little bit about the Tigers in that he scouted them. He's watched them for the better part of a decade when he was with the Minnesota Twins. So on that front, I can understand why Al Avila would be comfortable in making this hire. Is it the right move? That's something that's going to be debated for a long time. In my opinion, I feel like he can be that stabilizing force. Can he get those wins necessary in 3 to 5 years potentially? I know he signed a 3-year deal. It leads me to have a lot of question marks regarding can he keep up with the times in order to be successful? Because look at the two teams that are representing the American League and National League in the World Series, the Dodgers and the Astros, two organizations that are using advanced sabermetrics to the highest degree.
The two highest, I guess you could say, in tune analytically ball clubs in Major League Baseball, the Dodgers and Astros, you could say easily.
The biggest systems, right?
Yes, the biggest systems possible. Astros put so much manpower into it, the Dodgers as well, and look at their ball clubs, how they built them up analytically. The Dodgers, they have the money, those resources as well, but now they have the deep, rich farm system, rich, full of talent, right? And the Astros tanked for a good 2 years at least, where they went heavy tank. And now the Tigers are kind of going down that path, but then they hire a manager who doesn't even know what a podcast is. I don't think he knows anything really new, advanced baseball, new, advanced technology, anything like that. But I bet Jim Leyland had an input and said, this guy has experience, won multiple AL Central Division crowns, made the playoffs all those times, winning the division with the Twins, managed in the same division as the Tigers, knows about Miguel Cabrera from afar, but has seen all these Tigers vets, at least, from afar for years, and supposedly he learned on the job with the D-backs this past season as their bench coach about the analytics and how to use them a little bit. But the thing is, there's no time for him to learn on the job now about how to use and apply analytics with this ball club, how to construct a lineup using analytics and the like, because we already had a guy in Brad Ausmus who had to learn on the job in another manner. Guess how that turned out? 4 years of mediocre baseball, right? To a large degree. So that didn't pan out. Now you want Gardenhire to pan out and for the Tigers to win some games as well along the way as they stink, because they're going to stink a lot. And the thing is, for me, Gardenhire did say in his press conference that, you know what, who says we have to lose and that we can't win? He said that in so many words. Well, guess what? Everybody from afar is saying that you're going to have to lose. If you want to build up this farm system and kind of build up the system analytically, in that analytical mindset, and then, well, to use your ball players, your youth analytically, you need to be bad for a certain amount of time. Really, to build up any team anyway, analytically or non-analytically, you gotta stink for at least 2-3 seasons. So the thing is, that means Gardy is not gonna win much. There's not gonna be many Gardy parties, right? To start off, or maybe at all in his 3-year tenure with the Tigers.
So what do you think, once Al Avila sat down and interviewed Ron Gardenhire, what do you think appealed to Al Avila for him to make the move and finally pull the trigger. What does Gardenhire, looking at it from the Tigers' perspective, what does he bring to the table?
Veteran savvy, as you already noted, we both noted already in this podcast, Doc, but also the disciplinarian attitude and mentality that he can bring to the clubhouse, a clubhouse that kind of became despondent, and I would say also a little bit too much flamboyant and not worried about winning. The productivity of themselves and the manner in which they carried themselves on the baseball diamond, even off of it. So I think he'll bring that savvy, that experience, obviously, savvy and experience both, obviously, but also that disciplinarian, I think, mentality and attitude to get the Tigers aligned in the right manner mentally as well. So they're ready each and every single game, and they're focused on the game as well. He's going to keep his team focused, and perhaps better focused than Brad Ausmus was able to. And Ausmus was a player's manager. Gardenhire, I believe people like him, people respect him in baseball inner circles, and past players, respected him, but he's going to bring that brash attitude, that persona that tells you he's serious about baseball and about these guys playing baseball the right way. So I think he's going to bring that brash attitude, that disciplinarian attitude once again, that gets these guys' minds right, at least. They're more focused on baseball, and so they're not as aloof. They're not as despondent and not worried about their productivity and about producing positive results and getting better as ball players and as a collective unit, where that might not have been as focused upon because Ausmus kind of let these guys run around and do their own thing because he was too nice. He was Mr. Nice Guy, right? Gardenhire knows you can't always be Mr. Nice Guy. Leland brought that right to the Tigers clubhouse in 2006 when he first came on the job. I think Gardy will instill that as well right away on the job, Doc.
Okay, so what do you want to see in his first year managing the Detroit Tigers? Is there a win count that you think would be appropriate? Do you just want to see progression with a bunch of the arms and a bunch of the young players? What would you say are some things that you're keening in on his first go-around with the Detroit Tigers in his first season?
I think how he relates to the young players and gets through to them. And I think, once again, Ausmus, his tone and his tune wore off, right? It wasn't the same. It wore away. The Tigers weren't listening and respecting him anymore as the clubhouse general. And he should have been respected more, or brought that mentality and instilled that more, that commander-in-chief attitude and mentality. And I don't think Ausmus properly did for the majority of his 4 years on the job. And mostly not because of anything he did, but because of his age. The players could relate to him far too well and didn't take him seriously at times. He's going to make sure, Gardenhire is going to make sure that his players respect him and take him seriously at all times. So I like that aspect and that part of Gardy and what he brings to the table for the Tigers. And I think that's why Avila decided to choose him. And I think we've got to see how these young players develop. It would have been the case with any manager hire, Gabe Kapler included, Alex Cora, any young manager too. We want to see how these young players develop and start developing right away as soon as 2018. There's no time to take off for these players or for ownership, the front office, for manager Ron Gardenhire and his coaching staff. There's no time to take off for these guys in developing these ball players. It's time to start doing it right now and to see them start growing right now as well, Doc.
So let's peek into some of his numbers when he served as the Minnesota Twins manager. In 13 seasons as the Twins manager, Gardenhire's team had a losing record 5 times and won the division 6 times. Despite all of the team's regular season success, the Twins advanced to the ALCS only once and did not advance to the World Series.
Never got to the World Series, never had playoff success. But the thing is, Tigers aren't worried about playoff success right now.
In his tenure as the manager, the Twins posted a playoff record of 6 wins and 21 losses. He's the only manager in Major League Baseball history to take a team to the playoffs at least 6 times and never make it to the World Series, and only one of 4 with at least 4 playoff appearances to never appear in the big dance. So I guess, to be crass, is Ron Gardenhire the definition of a stopgap manager?
Absolutely. I think you nailed it on the head, and you were talking about that, and we had talked about it before, about whether or not this manager, this next one replacing Brad Ausmus, would be that stopgap kind of guy. Gardenhire fits the bill so much because he has little to no playoff success, right? And never getting to the World Series. So you can't trust him with the ball club in the postseason. And the Tigers aren't going to be that team that gets to the postseason in the next 2 to 3 years. So for the length of his contract, 3-year contract as manager with the Tigers, you really can't predict and bank on the Tigers making the playoffs in any of these seasons coming up. So I think he definitely fits the bill of a stopgap manager, and it's why they don't really care about the fact that he's had a little playoff success, Doc.
See, I know as we talk, I can understand that fans are going to be a little bit disappointed. People that are into the advanced sabermetrics are going to be disappointed. I'm a little bit disappointed too because it's not the sexy pick. But if you start adding layers, you start adding the caveats that we kind of know it's going to be a stopgap. Nobody's really expecting the Tigers to win in the next 2 seasons. With that said, don't you think potentially that Ron Gardenhire, could you reframe how you look at it and say potentially maybe year 1, you don't see some of the same mistakes that you saw consistently under Brad Ausmus. You feel like the clubhouse potentially could, benefit from having somebody with a new voice. You feel like the Tigers can basically benefit from a man with years and years of baseball experience. And I would expect some advancement and some improvement in some of the players. I want to see advancement in Nick Castellanos, Jacoby Jones, Boyd and Norris, the starting pitchers. At least I kind of am telling myself, and maybe I'm lying to myself, but I'm telling myself that at least Ron Gardenhire potentially will know how to use the starting staff, will know how to use the bullpen, and will basically make proper decisions more often than not in terms of basically managing a ball club. Now, are the Tigers going to have enough in terms of talent on the field to make some things happen? There are some positives that you can look to potentially in Michael Fulmer. Maybe Jordan Zimmerman turns it around. There are a couple things you can latch onto in terms of hope, but in terms of looking at Ron Gardenhire and what he provides, I think that potentially we're being a little bit too harsh knowing that he doesn't know the numbers. They are working on it. It is a little bit embarrassing that the Tigers are this far behind in using the numbers, but I feel like if Gardenhire and Al Avila can work together, find those diamonds in the rough, maybe in the minors, maybe, in free agency, then potentially there could be some success. And so my thinking was maybe year 1 in the neighborhood of like 75 to 82 wins. In that neighborhood, you can't go 64 wins again. That was pretty bad.
Well, I think he'll stabilize the clubhouse. He'll bring 3 things specifically to Doc: seriousness, fire, as in passion, and accountability. I think the Tigers were lacking in those 3 specific departments, at least towards the end of Brad Ausmus's tenure with the Tigers. And I think year number 3 for Gardenhire, I think he'll get to year number 3 of his contract, and year number 3 will be the year in which they want to see productive win-loss results. So more wins and much more wins and losses produced by Gardenhire in his club in year number 3. If he doesn't get to a productive win total in year number 3, I think Gardy is on his way out of town.
And then the other part too, I know it's something that a lot of people don't talk about, but this was a man that battled cancer and is now living in remission, thank goodness. But you have to bring up the fact, man's 60 years old now, he's got to be doing the job, and it's a grind. This is a man.
Hey, what are you trying to say? He's old? My dad's 60. What are you trying to say to him? He might be listening to this podcast. Oh, well, guess what? He's not going to probably, so no problem with that.
Can your dad manage a baseball club?
I asked him that, actually, jokingly, but also seriously a little bit, and he said, yeah, he would take on the job. But hey, any 60-year-old man still has that vibrant, right? Maybe not any, but a lot of them still have that passion, that fire in them, where they don't want to admit that they're old. They don't want to admit that life has passed them by and their best years have passed them by. Gardenhire is still going to bring that passion. I really, truly believe that, Doc.
So before we get to our featured guest of the podcast, do you think, in terms of the tenure of Ron Gardenhire, will he be more successful than Brad Ausmus?
No, because...
Really?
Because he has a lesser ball club to work with. It's about talent at the end of the day. And if you really envision Gardenhire coming in here and producing results and productive results right away like Jim Leland did back in 2006, it's not going to happen. So just keep dreaming on that one, Doc.
I think Ron Gardenhire will win a playoff series. He'll have more success, but he'll be a little bit better than Brad Ausmus, but he'll definitely revert back to some pitfalls in that the Tigers won't get to the World Series under Gardenhire. Maybe they'll advance to an ALCS. That might be the ceiling at this point in time, is to try and reach and stretch and fight and claw in the next 5 to 6 years. It won't be in the first 3 years.
He'll get that many years because I'll say this much. If he wins a playoff series in his 3 years on the job here coming up, he'll get a 4th year, definitely. I don't know about 5 or 6. I mean, even a 4th year is hard to say right now because they might lose 100 games the next 2 years at least, as we know, Doc.
Does Ron Gardenhire earn an extension with the Detroit Tigers?
If he wins a playoff series in these 3 years, yes. That could happen in year number 3, but guess what? I don't see it happening, so I don't see him gaining that contract extension.
So 1 and done, 3 years, and he's done.
3 years and done. So, hey, one less year than Brad Ausmus, and Brad Ausmus, what did he do, really? He never won a playoff series. So, hey, it could happen for Gardy, and because he has that experience, that name, that credibility, he could get 4 or 5 years on the job, but Do I think he should if he doesn't win a playoff series in 3 years? Or if they don't at least show signs of improvement from year 1 to year number 2 to year number 3? If that doesn't occur, Doc, I don't think he deserves a 4th year on the job. I'll just say that much.
All right, let's take our first time out. We'll come back with who on Vito's VIP line?
Anthony Broome of 24/7 Sports. He'll be on with us just after this quick commercial break on Tigers Talk. And Doc, the Detroit Sports Commission is one of our fine sponsors and has been now for a while. And guess what? Since '01, the Detroit Sports Commission has applied its expert touch to marketing and to selling the Metro Detroit area as a marquee destination for regional, national, and international amateur sporting events. And through the Detroit Sports Commission's help, these events have attracted thousands of visitors and pumped millions of dollars into our local economy. It is why Detroit is now not only the place where champions are made, but also the place where championships are played. To find out more about the Detroit Sports Commission and all of the events they are bringing to our very region, Doc, follow the DSC on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports, and make sure to check out their fine website at DetroitSports.org. And now, joining me on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company via Vito's VIP line is Anthony Broome of 24/7 Sports. He covers the Vikings for the CBS Sports digital owned 247sports.com, and he is a managing editor for SB Nation's Maize and Brew blog. Anthony, how's it going?
It's going great. It's not very often I get referred to as someone on the VIP line, so I appreciate that hookup there. It's good to be here.
Well, great to have you on, and you deserve that VIP status, Anthony. Let me tell you that much. So you are on Tigers Talk to talk some Tigers, and Ron Gardenhire getting hired by the Tigers. Not the most fruitful or exciting or sexy hire, let's say. And I don't think we're going to have a Gardy party all of a sudden here about that hiring. So, but first and foremost, what are your thoughts on this hire by the Detroit Tigers?
I don't want to say it's a strange hire because it's almost the safest hire and the expected hire that they could make. I know the Illiches have been fans of Ron Gardenhire for the last few years. There were reports that Brad Ausmus may have been pushed out a couple years ago for Gardenhire. So I'm not surprised it was him. If the rumors are true that it came down to him and Freddie Gonzalez, it seems like ownership won out on this one. The weird thing to me is, this is an organization that went pretty public, towards the end of the season about, we want to be more of a low budget franchise. We want to be a franchise that leans a little more heavily on analytics. But then they hire a guy in Ron Gardenhire who has kind of been, I don't want to say, well, I will say it. I mean, the kind of the poster boy of the anti-analytics, anti-sabermetrics type thing. Now, he'll tell you that he has a new lease on that sort of thing from working in Arizona. They leaned on that pretty heavily there, and that was a team that made the postseason. So he does have some experience there now. They were the story that the first people he greeted when he got to Detroit was the analytics staff. So perhaps he's a little more open to it, but it's hard to get excited about really any hire they make right now because this is a franchise that I'm not sure what the direction is right now. I mean, they want to get younger. They obviously unloaded a ton of payroll this year, but the next few years is going to be a struggle. I said kind of from the outset, whoever signed up to take this job was sort of volunteering to win maybe 100 games a year the next couple seasons. So, but they have a vet. I mean, he's a good veteran presence. He's, maybe a little bit less of a player's manager than Ausmus was. So maybe there's something there for them. Not excited. I'm not going to sit here and rip the hire because I don't think this franchise is a manager away from being a factor again.
No, Anthony Broome, not even close for the Tigers. You can say that right now in terms of being a winning product and producing that consistently the next 2, maybe 3 years. So the length of Gardenhire's contract, and you could say that Gardy has been hired to get fired. You really could say that and argue that right now. When you look at the Tigers roster, and once again, what is expected of them, it doesn't look too fruitful the next 2-3 years. So right now, how I view it, and how my co-host Doc actually views it too, Gardenhire is a stopgap manager for the Tigers and nothing more than that.
Yeah, that's accurate. I think from the start, to me, he's a bridge guy. Like you said, when you look at when could the Tigers possibly be good again, or if you want to look at that, I mean, who's to say they can't flip the switch? There's still some good veteran players on that team, but I don't see it happening. However, when I look at the window for this franchise and I look at, when's that next window of opportunity, I look at when those guys like the Alex Faedos, the Matt Mannings, the Bo Burrows of the world, when those guys are going to come up. And it still seems like they're at least another, maybe 2-3 seasons away. So, I mean, they've got the number 1 pick coming up. They've got a little more payroll flexibility now. So we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. I mean, you're kind of right. I think this is kind of Gardy taking the job. This is maybe his last shot to be a manager in Major League Baseball. And they expect to win, and I respect that. But when you look at where this is going, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, I'm not even sure Al Avila will still be around. So this may just be the start of the rebuild that's to come.
And the sad thing for Gardenhire, when I look at him and what could happen with the Tigers the next 3 years and length of his contract once again, I see a lot of losing, so he may never get another shot at managing again after these 3 years of 90 to 100 losses each season. So it could really smell for his overall Major League managerial record and cost him a job in the future that maybe he still would like to get. Because, he's going to be 60, right? He's a little bit older, but not extremely old. The good years of his life aren't totally past him. Let's not, give up on the guy. And the thing is, he might want another managerial gig. I don't think he'll get it after these 3 years if they are as bad as we expect right now, Anthony.
That's the thing about Major League Baseball is that there are a lot of average to below average managers out there. And that's not to say Gardy is that. Obviously had a lot of success in Minnesota, but a couple bad years in Detroit doesn't help him, but I'm not going to say it necessarily destroys his career outlook because, we've seen guys like, just think Dusty Baker is a guy who keeps getting opportunities. We've seen, Brad Ausmus could get a job somewhere. So, you wouldn't think that with what Brad Ausmus showed in Detroit, he may be worthy of a job somewhere else, but he's still getting interviews and, it wouldn't be a shock. Now, mind you, he's a younger guy too, but, I won't ever call someone's managerial career dead and dashed in Major League Baseball just because it always kind of seems like Lloyd McClendon has had managerial jobs. We've seen, when you look at some of the candidates the Tigers interviewed, Freddie Gonzalez, Phil Nevin, there's a lot of opportunities out there and baseball teams aren't, it's very rare that you see a baseball team stick with a manager more than 4 or 5 years. So there's always a lot of opportunities and always a lot of names out there. So I won't say that his career hopes are dashed, but like you said, he is kind of an older guy. This could be his last opportunity, but I won't call it a career killer unless it's historically bad. And
you know what? Like you said, coaches in really any sport, right? In any professional sport, collegiate sport, they're kind of hired to get fired eventually after 3, 4, 5 years on the job. And you can't write off anybody in terms of getting a job because of retreads like Dusty Baker, which continuously get jobs, as you noted, just fired by the Nats. We'll see if he actually ever gets another job. Managing, that is. But, hey, it could happen. And these guys do have track records as well of winning, at least at one point. It just looks like, now for the Tigers specifically, once again, not to harp on it completely, but they're going to be a very losing ball club, a team that loses nearly 100. So that could damage his record, his reputation a little bit. But like you said, Anthony, don't write him off completely. And don't write off, too, that this hire might not be the worst hire in the world. It's just, once again, not sexy. But I think it's hard for us to have a guy learn on the job pretty much, to learn the analytics, and at his age, I just don't see it happening with Gardenhire.
Yeah, we'll see what happens I'm interested in seeing how he fills out his staff, if he brings in some veteran guys or maybe some up and coming guys, maybe a guy like a Brad Ausmus type maybe would be better suited to be a bench coach for someone or to be on the staff before they get thrown into the fire like that. So I'm interested in seeing, some of the guys he brings along with him. I know it certainly looks like everyone has kind of been served their walking papers from the Ausmus era, and those guys were kind of offshoots of the Jim Leland era too. So it is a new era. It is a reset button. We'll see what happens with that. But yeah, again, if it's going to sink for a while, you want a guy who can at least maybe steer you out of complete disaster. When you talk about ruining careers, maybe you bring in a young guy for this job and it is historically bad. And then that's a guy whose career you ruined. So, again, people don't like it. Some people love it. Some people completely hate it. I'm not in love with it, but when I look at where this team is headed, some of the growing pains that are going to be coming, some of the, there's still this is a franchise that still has a lot of problems. I think that their drafts haven't been that great. I mean, outside of Nick Castellanos, can you think of a position player that they've groomed over the last 20 to 25 years? Pitching has obviously been, it's worked out and it hasn't at times, but oftentimes pitching has been used for trade currency for them. And, that helped them get guys like Miguel Cabrera. It helped get some of these other guys that were on these playoff contending teams. But now that you're not there, are you going to actually develop those players that you bring in? So player development and scouting is something that, doesn't matter. These guys need to be ready when they get called up. And if they're not, that's not really Ron Gardenhire's fault. And that's a bigger issue. And that's where I still have questions about Al Avila. And really that was the question about the Dave Dombrowski era. But when you hired Al Avila to be his, who was kind of his right-hand man, it's still kind of a continuation of the way things were going before. So that's the concern I still have.
Anthony, I would have liked that fresher voice, or would like that too now for the coaching staff. And it is interesting, like you said, how he fills it out. And maybe the bench coach is a hot shot managerial candidate of the future that he gets in to be his bench coach. Alex Cora was with the Astros, now hired to be the Red Sox next skipper. And I love that hire for the Red Sox. And I think they're going to win and win big. And they're already full of talent. And with talent, you got to revert back to what you brought up with Avila and company, drafting guys and building up the farm system in the right direction. Now, that is so vital for the Tigers moving forward. And you see these other teams that have built up their farm systems in the right manner. The Astros and Dodgers, and with an analytical approach, and they're in the Fall Classic, largely because of it. And I wanted to ask you, who do you got and why in this year's Fall Classic?
Most things on paper would say that the Dodgers, they were the best team in baseball outside of, a 25 or 30 game stretch at the end of August into September. I like the Astros, though. Justin Verlander, obviously that's a guy that we hold near and dear. And I know there are some people rooting against him, but I want to see that guy do well and get a ring, because that's why he was traded in the first place, to give that guy a chance to win a ring. And now that he's there, he's just pitched so well. And I love, the Astros. We can kind of parlay this from the conversation we just had. The Astros were a team that were bad for a while, kind of like the Cubs were bad for a while. But you build on these drafts. You get a Jose Altuve. You get a Carlos Correa. You get all these guys that they have in their system now. I like the Astros to win this one. I think it could very well be a series that ends up going 6 or 7 games. But I'm rooting for the Astros, and I think that I do think that they'll end up winning it all. It's a good story. That city's been through a lot, and I think that's the team that gets it done this year.
How about the Dodgers, though, maybe getting out the broom? Let's say, hey, the broom, or the Astros getting out the broom and sweeping the Dodgers. But you know what? It's hard not to like the Astros, like you said, because of Verlander, too. I think a lot of people are jumping on that Astros bandwagon if you're a Tigers fan, and, well, specifically a Justin Verlander fan.
Yeah, baseball playoffs are so hard to predict, and especially the World Series, because, if you have 2 bad games in a row, you're in an 0-2 hole, and you're fighting an uphill battle, and that's where we see teams get swept or get broomed out in 5 games. So the old Jim Leland adage is momentum is only as good as your next day's starting pitcher. So based on what I've seen this playoffs, Clayton Kershaw he's the best pitcher on the planet. Can he continue it? He's had a good postseason. Can he do it on the biggest of all stages? We'll see. The matchups everywhere are going to be incredible to watch, and I actually think this has last year's World Series with the Cubs and Indians was probably the best one that I've watched in a while, but this has the potential to be, right up there with some of the all-time great ones. So I'm excited to see it. I thought these were the 2 best teams in baseball throughout the year. And, anytime that a sport's 2 best teams can be on display for the country and the world to see, I think it's a good thing. And this is a good thing for baseball. And
2 100-win or better teams. To see that happen in baseball doesn't happen very often either. And the only bad thing for the Dodgers is being that first team to clinch a World Series berth. Lately hasn't worked out for that team, being the first to clinch and to go to the World Series. So LA Dodger Blue has a lot of pressure on them to win, and I think even more than the Astros at this point. But I'll give my World Series prediction later in this episode, and I'll let you go, Anthony, with that. Thanks for all the time on this week's edition of Tigers Talk, and we'll bring out the broom again maybe on a future episode of the show, too.
Hey, anytime, man. Just let me know. Good to be on.
Thank you much. I'll talk to you. And that was Anthony Broome. And you can follow Anthony, by the way, on Twitter at Anthony T. Broome. He writes for 24/7 Sports. Once again, he covers the Minnesota Vikings for 24/7, and he's the managing editor for SB Nation's Maize and Brew blog. So that's Maize, M-A-I-Z-E-N, and then Brew, B-R-E-W. So he covers a lot of stuff, and we didn't even get into U of M football. Wanted to, but hey, that's just a part of not a lot of time, right? We only have so much time here every single week on Tigers Talk, and we dove into a lot of Tigers topics, and then it covered some World Series-centric topics, and obviously, you and I have to chop it up a little bit regarding the Fall Classic too, Doc.
Here it is. It's that time of year, the World Series, Houston and the LA Dodgers. Pretty serious matchup. I'm kind of impressed.
Well, to get, once again, two teams that had great regular seasons, it's very hard to come by, isn't it? And two teams that won at least 100 games, you don't see that very often in baseball. The only thing, once again, I brought it up during the segment with Anthony Broome, is that these teams that clinched first haven't won the World Series lately. So that's the only scary thing for Dodger Blue. But I picked the Dodgers. I did, to start the year, and I picked them actually to beat the Indians. Now I have LA Dodger Blue beating the Astros in this Fall Classic here that we have to talk about, Doc. And the Astros, though, because of Verlander, he brought them new life, didn't he? Post-Hurricane Harvey, he brought them new life. And right now, in my opinion, they want to win it all. I know that much. Once you get to the World Series, you want to win it all at all costs. But they kind of are playing with house money. Where the Dodgers, you know what? With all their success in recent memory, all their CS appearances in recent memory, and division crowns, I believe 5 in a row now, Doc. Well, guess what? They've got the pressure to get it done. It is mightily, the pressure, that is mightily on the Dodgers' collective shoulders and backs to get it done. And Clayton Kershaw, they have to ride him. You know, he is responsible for a large amount of the Dodgers' pitching success. But did you know, really quick, here's a quick factoid about the Dodgers and their bullpen. It did not allow a run during the NLCS and now has gone 23 straight postseason innings without allowing a run. That is a Major League Baseball postseason record, Doc.
You have to give the Astros huge props because once the Yankees won 3 consecutive games at home, you thought, it might be an uphill climb. Then Justin Verlander is called upon in Game 6, and he threw another gem, and it was fascinating. And for the Astros to only allow the Yankees, who by all accounts are a strong offensive juggernaut, a team that featured Aaron Judge, who destroyed the baseball in his rookie campaign, you say to yourself, okay, it's going to be tight in a Game 7, but the Astros came back with a combination of some quality starting pitching, and they were able to advance. So this World Series is going to be really challenging for the Astros to step over the hump. Because, yeah, the Dodgers are the best team in Major League Baseball, but I'm going to go on record and say this. If the Astros, is it 2-3-2 this year, or is it 2-2-1-1-1? Do you know the...
And it is 2-3-2, Doc.
So I'm going to go on a limb and say this. If the Astros can take one of the 2 games, I don't believe it'll come back to Los Angeles. I believe that the Astros, bold prediction, will win all 3 at home and take it down. If they can get that first victory. If they don't, if the Dodgers jump out to a 2-0 series lead, and it's really going to be tough, but it's going to be tough for the Dodgers to execute. I mean, they got Kershaw Game 1, which is an edge for them. I feel like Verlander versus Rich Hill is an advantage for the Astros. So in terms of which game do I think the Astros have a better chance, it's probably Game 2. But if you jump out early in Game 1, which takes place on Tuesday, then, oh my goodness, then by the time potentially they get back to Houston, they could be 2-0. So if they get that victory, one of the first 2 games in the World Series, then I do believe that they'll win all 3 and continue that streak of that magical run of not losing any postseason games at home.
And Doc, how about this much too with the Astros? How key home field was in the LCS round, because the Astros won the first 2 games in Houston, right? Yankees won the next 3 in New York, and then Houston came back and won the final 2 and won the series in 7 games. And largely because of the productivity of Justin Verlander. 9-0 now with the Astros in totality, counting the regular season. 4-0 in the postseason. 3 starts and 1 relief appearance that he made for the Stros in this year's playoffs so far. And his ERA in those appearances, 1.46. He won the MVP because of his efforts in the last round as well. He has been money and the definition of clutch for the Stros since they acquired him, Doc.
All right, how do you break this series down? Who must perform for the Astros? How do the Dodgers potentially win this World Series on their end?
Well, you're saying for the Dodgers now? I think for the Dodgers to win, their bullpen, if their bullpen keeps it up and they have Kershaw, who pitches well too, that's a great combination right there. And then Justin Turner and Chris Taylor being productive once again. They were co-LCS MVPs for the Dodgers against the Cubbies. And for the Astros, I think it comes down to Dallas Keuchel also being productive. If he is, and JV, who hasn't had the best success, remember, in the World Series yet in his Major League career, if he can, just reverse course and look sharp and very, very effective in the World Series for the Stros, and Keuchel is too, I think that's a great combination for the Stros and one that allows them to win the World Series. But that's really if, in my opinion, if Kershaw isn't money as he should be. And that's why I have the Dodgers coming out on top still, as I said earlier in the podcast, earlier in the season, before the season even started, had them beating the Indians once again, have them right now winning it all. And it could be a long series, though, because remember, once again, how great the Astros have been at home throughout this year's playoffs.
All right, give me Astros in 5. I do believe potentially that there is something going on in terms of, that magic that's needed regarding hurricane relief. I think that Houston's playing an outstanding brand of baseball. I do think that potentially that they have the edge in pitching outside of one of the best pitchers in baseball, Clayton Kershaw. I feel like the rest of the way, I think they can hit Rich Hill. I think they can hit Yu Darvish. I think they can potentially take advantage of the lesser pitchers of the Dodgers. And with the efforts, going on around Houston and the whole hurricane relief thing, I think that that's going to be enough to drive the Houston Astros to win the entire thing. 5 games.
Charlie Morton, by the way, and Lance McCullers combined pitched great in Game 7. How about the quality performances of those two guys? Guys that, I don't know if Stros fans, even themselves, really said that they were going to get it done in a Game 7 situation, even when it was at home. But the Stros got it done in 7 games. The Dodgers got it done in 5 games. And let me give you a little bit of trivia here. It's the Dodgers reaching the World Series for the first time since when, Doc?
1989?
1988.
88.
When Kirk Gibson hit that great home run, the Dodgers won it in 88. Last time they won it, too, obviously. Astros last made it in what year?
2005.
Yes, more recently, in 2005, and they lost to who, Doc?
In 2005. They were in the National League then, huh? So,
they were,
so
yes.
It was an American League team. Yankees.
My brother's favorite team, which is?
The White Sox, 2005.
Lost to the White Sox. The Ozzie Guillen-led White Sox got it done against the Stros. Phil Gardner was a manager. Former Tiger skipper was a manager of the Astros in 2005, the last time the Astros reached the Fall Classic, Doc.
Okay, so you got the Dodgers. I got the Astros. It should be fun. How heavily are you going to peek into the World Series?
Well, heavily. I'm a baseball guy.
That's it.
And if I want to be a baseball aficionado more and more, I got to watch the Fall Classic.
I hope the contests don't take 3.5 hours because I'm interested. And before we get out of here, how much should the fans of Detroit root for Justin Verlander? I know some people might have an interest in Curtis Granderson, but he was left off the Dodgers roster, so he's not even going to be part of the World Series all that much. So Detroit is going to be fascinated and locked in to see what Justin Verlander can do, being that he was part of the team. For me, I don't go that route. Once the ties were severed, once he was traded, I kind of hope he loses. And I hope that he feels the sting that he felt similar to what he experienced in Detroit because we saw great performances in the ALDS and the ALCS, and then when the World Series happened, he kind of dipped off a little bit. So I want the Astros to experience the same pain that the Tigers felt. So I'm hoping down with Justin Verlander. But, I did predict the Astros to win, but I'm not rooting for the Astros because of Justin Verlander. I'm rooting for the millions of supporters that they have who are dealing with tough stuff regarding the hurricane and stuff like that. But in terms of extra cheering for Justin Verlander, no way, Jose.
You are one bad hombre, and we have a two bad hombre podcast to record as well this week that comes out on Saturday. Remember that. I am rooting for Justin Verlander. I think a lot of Tigers fans are. Anthony Broome, pretty sure he is doing the same. And a lot of people that have watched these Tigers, watch Verlander throughout his career, are hoping he wins because he lost twice in the Fall Classic with the Tigers. Hasn't been there since 2012 until now. So he is long overdue. He's been money in this year's postseason, so he is much deserving as well of being a World Series champion. But I don't think he gets it done. But I am rooting for him, unlike you. You think they're going to get it done, the Astros, but you're not rooting for Verlander. I'm rooting for JV, but I don't think the Stros are going to get it done.
Are you going to cry if Justin Verlander wins a trophy or hoists it up in the celebration?
Well, I'll say this much. I could see him winning one for sure before the Tigers, and I won't be crying. I know you're talking about referencing my Detroit Athletic Company blog article from a few weeks back, but I don't think I'll be crying this time around. I was much less mature back then. I was a child, Doc. Remember back then. 14, that's a child. Or maybe a teenager, but still, a young boy. Come on, don't be so harsh on me.
So for those that didn't listen or don't recall, Vito cried when
he pitched that first no-hitter of his in 07 against the Brewers. I did cry. Okay, come on, man. Got to be so harsh on me. I was a child, like I said.
Great podcast, sir. Always enjoy recording the Tigers Talk podcast. Comes out every single Wednesday, DetroitSportsPodcast.com.
Adios, everybody.